Welcome friends to another 40k video. Today we join Uriel Ventris and the Death Watch as they infiltrate a hive ship to eliminate the Norn Queen and defeat the Tyranids laying waste to the planet below. Ventris rides in a Thunderhawk along with the Death Watch. The Wolf leads the parade. There are also warriors from the White Scars, Raven Guard, the Howling Griffins, and the White Consuls, and veteran Pausanias and his heavy flamer of the same chapter as Uriel. And to lead this Death Watch went against the Codex written so long ago by his Gene Father, and they entered the upper atmosphere under escort. As they flew, Uriel checked for the weapon the Inquisitor equipment had given him to take down the Norn Queen and save the planet. An interview came the craggy cliff of the hive ship's side. Inquisitor equipment had showed them the most likely locations of possible entry points, and he scanned the grey moonscape before him for one. The aerial armada had got them through, and now it was time to make good on the sacrifice. They entered through a waste-expelling flap. The pilot got them inside. Small from a distance, as they moved through it, 60 meters in diameter. The surface of the interior of the hive ship felt soft and spongy. A diffuse green light lit up the ribbed chamber they found themselves in. Its vastness filled with pungent fumes and knee-deep organic effluent. The stench was indescribable, and Uriel turned down his olfactory auto-sensor before his disgust overwhelmed him, and they moved into the depths of the hive ship. Oozing slime dripped from the ceiling, hissing as droplets pattered against the shoulder guards of the Death Watch. The fleshy passageways of the hive ship were a cornucopia of biological horrors, fleshy folds of muscle and gristle lining every wall, and suppurating pools of digestive juices filling every footprint they left. Tiny slave organisms hurried along every passageway, ignoring the space marines as they pushed deeper into the body of the beast. They have a chamber with egg sacs inside. Damia says this is where the Tyranids slept as they moved between galaxies. One who had never awakened was inside. A fleshy fold of bone lifted, and they were found by a wave of Tyranids. The flamer from Pausanias and heavy bolter shells from the others hit them, and they held back for a moment, but then they were attacked from another side as well. A great beast bounded towards them, its armoured carapace low and armoured like a scorpion. It bounded towards Jagaton, who ducked and slashed its soft underbelly with his razor-edged tulwar. Looping organs spilled from the wound. Hengast howled and slashed his power sword through its body, dragging Jagaton to his feet while firing his bolter with his free hand. Pausanias fell back, each step accompanied by a spray of liquid fire into knots of screeching aliens. Uriel blazed away at the creatures, and as they poured from the walls to assail him, many were cut down. He didn't know how many beasts the hive ship had at its disposal, but he knew they could not afford to find out. Death Watch, fall back, he ordered. They found another route. Alvarex laid down fire, breaking the attacking beasts with it. His aim sure. Dozens of aliens fell, blown apart by his sanctified shells. Then the ground opened up beneath him, and he was gone, sucked into the depths of the ship. Uriel shouts his name. Pausanias burned those that tried to follow. Spores from a mushroom thing in the next room were brought into the air when Jagaton slashed at it, and they ate away at his armor, and then his body from within. The rest of them backed away. They pushed on and found thousands of litres of stinking biofluids that roared past the marines with the force of a tidal wave, pummeling their armor and ripping them from the walls of the pipe. Uriel felt alien flesh tear under his gauntlet and cursed as he was swept along. He spun crazily in the flow, slammed into the sides of the tunnel and his battle brothers, losing his orientation as he tumbled with the waste matter. All he could see was murky fluids and the occasional glimpse of the tunnel walls. He tried to grasp the sides of the tunnel, but the waving cilia had withdrawn into the meat of the walls. Uriel flipped upright for a second, saw an out-thrust gauntlet. He grabbed onto it and was pulled onto a bony ledge with the rest of the Death Watch. They pressed on and soon found the heart of the hive ship and its queen. The sight of the Norn Queen was something that Uriel would never forget. Ropes of dripping intestine and nutrients pumped viscous fluids into the belly of the Norn Queen. Its vast bloated head fused with the ribbed ceiling of the chamber. Six-legged creatures that resembled fat spiders crawled all over its body, cleaning, feeding and ministering to their queen. Huge, javelin-like spines protruded from her bony carapace, each dripped with hissing poison. The Norn Queen itself was as much a part of the bioship as an individual. Uriel checked he still had Cryptman's weapon, Xenos artifact, part Hrud and part Fusel technology. The Death Watch approach the Queen, and Guardian warriors are called by the nurse. Pausanias gives the first his gift of fire, and Plantar mutagenic bolts. Uriel runs forward, cutting through Xenos flesh with his power sword. Uriel spun under a scything blow from a leaping beast that was more fanged more than anything else, hacking it in two as he sensed the presence of something huge behind him. He threw himself forward, barely avoiding and sliced in two by a guardian organism. The alien beast towered above him, larger than the Carnifex, but more slender and quick. Its jaw was filled with dripping fangs, and its upper pair of limbs ended in flashing talons that slashed for his head. Uriel rolled aside to gouge the floor and slashed his sword at its legs. The creature bound over his blow, smashing its claws against his armor. Ceramite parted under the blow and blood washed down his side. Before the Laraman cells halted the flow, pain suppressors pumped into his body, and he staggered as the beast struck him again. He flew through the air, landing on the edge of a bubbling pool of stinking ichor. Whipping tentacles burst from the pool and wrapped around his midriff. Uriel cried out and slashed his sword through them, rolling to the base of the pool. The guardian organism bounded across to him, its hooves throwing up gouts of stinking fluids. Uriel rolled desperately, pushing himself to his knees, and raised his sword to block. Just as the claws hammered down towards him, sparks flew and he grunted as he held the strength of the beast at bay. He rolled beneath the claws, releasing his block and thrust his sword upward into the creature's groin. It howled and collapsed to one knee, driving the blade deeper into its flesh. Uriel ripped the weapon clear and hacked through the monster's midsection. It thrashed as it died, insectile creatures swarming over its corpse to devour it as food for the queen. Uriel staggered towards his target as Pausanias joined him. His sword was bloody and the armor of his silvered arm was missing. Their warrior bioforms still blocked their path, so his brother Marines held them whilst Uriel drove forward. Uriel ran for the bloated belly of the Norn Queen, his sword raised to strike down the final beast between him and his goal. Its claws snapped shut, and Uriel swept his sword through them. He leapt to meet the creature, ducked inside its guard as it flailed its razor claws at him, slashing down its own flesh to ruin. Uriel pulled himself up the creature's body, its bony exoskeleton providing ready-made handholds, and he slew it as he climbed and leapt onto the Norn Queen, his fingers closing on the hardened flesh of its hide. Hordes of these scavenger organisms closed on him as he climbed, biting and clawing him. They clambered all over him, even squeezing inside his armor, their weight alone threatening to prise him loose. Despite the pain suppressors, his chest was bathed in agony. He battered clear the scavengers long enough to draw Critman's pistol and pressed it against the belly of the Norn Queen and pulled the trigger, and the gene poison entered her. He was thrown off and hit the slimy floor of the chamber. Pausanias and the others fought on, but the poison seemed to have failed, so he joined his brothers, hoping to die alongside them in one last great stand. But then the last stand was not required. When the Norn Queen gave a screech, after hundreds of years of silence, the Queen's flesh boiled and ripped as her evolutionary genome was thrown into anarchy and stimulated beyond all control by Magos Locard's gene poison. All the other Tyranids in the area took up her cry, tearing at it themselves. The chamber shook, the very structure of the ship screaming as every creature was driven into a frenzy of uncontrolled mutation. Seeing it was working, the Death Watch team fled. Uriel felt a tremendous sense of vindication as if they left the chamber, knowing that he had made the right choice to lead the mission. But a 2-meter barb from the Queen struck him, and he slumped forward. His blood was not clotting throughout his body. His fellow Death Watch carried him off the ship as it disintegrated, and later he is saved by a blood transfusion and anticoagulants from a fellow Marine, Pausanias. With Uriel's delivery, Critman's plan had worked, and the planet below was free. So now, friends, I turn things over to you. What do you think of this tale of Uriel Ventris? Do you like the Norn Queens? You get a very heavy Aliens 2 vibe, at least I do from this. Do you want me to comment down below if you got what to say?